Welcome to this hard-hitting explainer. Today, we're going to break down the gritty anatomy of a crime under the Indian Penal Code and the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. We're delivering the ultimate legal crash course in a bold, no-nonsense format. Look, if you want to understand the exact mechanics of how the state wields its power, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it.
Listen up, because here is our roadmap for today. We're hitting 5 core units: anatomy of a crime, exceptions in state offenses, offenses against the body, property, health, and safety, and finally, state, society, and marriage. All right, kicking things off with Unit 1, anatomy of a crime, the foundations of liability. Make no mistake, there is a massive, definitive line drawn here. While a tort is really just a private dispute over damages, and you only need to prove it on a balance of probabilities, a crime is a whole different beast. It's a full-blown assault against society itself. This is where the state drops the hammer, with imprisonment or even death, demanding a standard of proof that is strictly beyond a reasonable doubt. The stakes are as high as they get. Now, every single criminal act escalates through 4 strict stages. Think about it for a second. Merely harboring a dark intention, or, buying a ski mask, that usually won't lock you up. The law truly strikes when you make that direct, undeniable movement into an attempt. And finally, the full commission of the act. So, the crucial anchor point here is this fundamental legal maxim. The act itself does not make a person guilty unless the mind is guilty. You absolutely must have both the physical act, known as actus reus, and the guilty mind, known as mens rea. Without that mental element, that specific intention or recklessness, criminal liability completely falls apart. Moving right along to Unit 2, exceptions and state offenses, the escape hatches and conspiracies. Now we're looking at your general exceptions, the ultimate shields in criminal law. They range from absolute immunity for young kids under 7, which is a concept known as Dolly Incapax, all the way to the highly scrutinized rights of private defense and insanity. If you can definitively prove one of these, even if you physically committed the act, the law says you are not a criminal. But listen, actually claiming these exceptions is incredibly tough. In the chilling case of Hari Singh Gand, the Supreme Court drew a really hard line on the insanity defense. Basically, medical insanity isn't enough. Under Section 84, you must prove total legal incapacity, meaning at the exact moment of the act, you were entirely incapable of knowing your actions were wrong or contrary to law. A momentary loss of temper? Yeah, that does not give you a free pass. On the flip side, we have the right of private defense. And boom, the Supreme Court stepped in with D.O. Narayan, ruling that if you are facing a violent assault, using a lethal weapon like a spear in sudden self-defense is legally justified. The court powerfully stated that survival isn't measured on golden scales. When you're literally fighting for your life, proportionality is not some strict mathematical equation. So what happens when multiple people plan a crime? That's criminal conspiracy. And looking through the lens of the devastating Parliament attack case, State v. Navjot Sindhu, we learned something huge. Direct proof of a spoken agreement isn't even necessary. The courts can infer that deadly meeting of minds purely from circumstantial conduct, especially when electronic call records seamlessly expose the network as digital evidence under Section 65B of the Evidence Act. All right, escalating to Unit 3, offenses against the body, from culpable homicide to legislative reform. Here's the absolute bottom line. All murder is culpable homicide, but not all culpable homicide is murder. The difference lies entirely in the sheer degree of intention and the probability of death. If the act is so imminently dangerous that death is a virtual certainty, it escalates from the broader genus of culpable homicide right into the highly penalized species of murder. Let's break down one of India's most famous trials to see this in action, the K.M. Nanavati case. A naval officer discovered his wife's affair, fetched his gun from his ship, drove to the lover's house, and shot him. He claimed grave and sudden provocation to reduce the charge from murder. But the Supreme Court dismantled that defense entirely. They ruled that because he had time to cool down and deliberately prepare, it was straight-up premeditated murder. This exact conviction ended jury trials in India forever, a massive turning point. Moving to sexual offenses, we must soberly address the Tukaram case, widely known as the Mathura rape case. This was a highly controversial 1979 verdict, where the Supreme Court tragically mistook a minor's terrified, passive submission in a police station for actual legal consent. This shocking misinterpretation rightfully triggered massive public outrage across the country, and it forced the heavy 1983 criminal law amendments that reshaped exactly how consent and the burden of proof are handled in custodial rape cases today. Pivoting now to Unit 4, Property, Health, and Safety. The mechanics of theft and violence. For an act to be classified as theft under the law, we're not talking about a loose definition. It must flawlessly hit every single one of these 5 required ingredients. It's got to be movable property, taken out of someone's possession, without their consent, moved even slightly, and critically, there must be a fixed, dishonest intention to take it. Which brings us to a fascinating question that tests this exact limit. Can you be convicted of theft if you pick up a handbag, rummage through it, find absolutely nothing valuable inside, and just put it right back? The verdict in R.V. Sum was definitive. He was acquitted of theft. You see, you cannot be convicted of full theft based on a conditional intention. The law demands a fixed, absolute, dishonest intent to permanently deprive the owner. Thinking to yourself, hey, I'll steal this only if it's worth money, simply does not meet the strict legal threshold for theft. Though, fair warning, it might still count as an attempt. Now, take a look at how property crimes violently escalate. A basic property crime like theft or extortion instantly transforms into robbery the second violence or the instant fear of death is introduced. And it morphs into the highly penalized gang-level crime of dacoity the moment 5 or more criminals team up to execute that robbery. The severity jumps exponentially. Finally, bringing it home with Unit 5, State, Society, and Marriage, overturning archaic laws. Delivering an absolute masterstroke for equality, the Supreme Court in the landmark 2018 case Joseph Shine v. Union of India struck down Section 497 of the IPC. They completely decriminalized adultery, declaring with commanding finality that a law treating married women as the chattel or property of their husbands violates the fundamental constitutional guarantees of equality and dignity, a huge leap forward. But remember, the law also protects society from words. In Subramanian Swamy v. Union of India, the Supreme Court faced a massive clash between 2 constitutional titans, your freedom of speech under Article 19 and someone else's right to life and reputation under Article 21. The court ruled that criminal defamation is in fact constitutionally valid. It acts as a necessary, proportionate restriction to ensure that freedom of speech doesn't just become a weapon to destroy a person's hard-earned reputation. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at the vast architecture of these laws we've just decoded. From the dark mental elements of murder to the massive constitutional battles over free speech and marriage, it's a complex machine. So ask yourself, as our society rapidly evolves, where does the true line between the state's power to punish public wrongs and the fierce defense of your individual liberty really lie? Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the system.